You're watching StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi, and joining us from New York City is Professor Victoria Tin-bor Hui. She is an associate professor at the University of Notre Dame and also a board member of the Hong Kong Democracy Council in the US. Thank you so much, Professor Hui, for giving us your time. I know it's pretty late there.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just wanted to get your quick reactions on, what's been called the most sweeping crackdown in Hong Kong. Over 50 ex-lawmakers, even prominent lawyers. There's even now, I think, the first foreign national, an American lawyer, John Clancy. Now, the warnings have been coming for months now about the national security law and how draconian and how blanket its usage can be used. Your reactions to the crackdown?
I think your characterization is absolutely correct. This is the largest sweep of the opposition in Hong Kong under the national security law, because in one sweep, they have arrested more people than in the last 6 months. So today, up to today, they're about over 90 people have been arrested, but in one go, they have arrested 55 people. And it's possible that they're going to arrest more. You're also quite right that this is very significant because an American lawyer who is not really a politician, but because he was put as the trustee holding on to the finance, the budget of the primaries, and therefore he's also arrested. It is also significant that some of these people are not exactly very political. For example, among them is one Hong Konger born in Hong Kong, but of South Asian origin. And he's well beloved by all the people because he's been helping with the minorities in Hong Kong. And he's also arrested and also charged for subversion. And which means that in a way is that there's really no reason why these people who were just essentially trying to campaign for the elections and also trying to win the elections, this is all they were trying to do. That this would be illegal. But what the regime is now saying is that, well, because they wanted to really challenge the regime, they wanted to take over the legislature because they wanted to win 35 plus one seat out of the 70 seats. And that is the cause for the crimes.
The Chinese will obviously wake up and throw it back at America in terms of what's happened overnight in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol. Do you see any significance in the timing in terms of the certification for the Biden presidency?
Well, there are two things. One is that obviously anything that looks bad in the U.S. is going to give Beijing the excuse. See, look, you guys call these rioters. You see, look at these people that are demonstrating, protesting, and you're also sending out the national guards. The thing that it is very different because one part is on the one side, these forces are anti-democratic. And in Hong Kong, the people protesting are supporting democracy against dictatorship. But another thing that is also important is that Beijing has been very good at timing its crackdown. It expected that Georgia was going to have the runoffs. It expected that this Congress was going to really can't certify the votes of the electorate. And therefore, there was going to be a big mess. And they pitched this perfectly so that, the world's attention is diverted to the U.S. And so that they are hoping that the crackdown on Hong Kong would get, unnoticed.
How bad a setback is it for the pro-democracy movement? Now, 53, they're saying almost all those legislators who were supposed to stand for the Legislative Council, the elections, of course, been postponed by Carrie Lam for over a year. Raids on media outlets continue. We've already seen Jimmy Lai, the bail proceedings are going on. Joshua Wong, Agnes Chow, they've already been sentenced. How much of a setback is it, this crackdown?
This is a total crackdown. It's basically, we cannot over-exaggerate its significance because the regime already disqualified opposition leaders. And then the rest, all those who were not disqualified, they also stepped down in solidarity. Essentially, there's no tolerance for any opposition in the Legislative Council. And the regime also was talking about, these people, once they're disqualified, they'll be disqualified for life. They also are trying to even disqualify local district councillors. They are talking about giving the vote to a lot of Hong Kongers who do not live in Hong Kong but live in the Greater Bay Area. And we know how easily it is going to, they can rig the votes there. And so Beijing has already put down a lot of these mechanisms to make sure that there's no way that the opposition could even run for office again. But yet, this is not enough. Apparently, they want to make their lives miserable. They want to arrest them, even if they can go on bail, which is still a big question mark. Then at least every day they go to sleep, they don't know, what's going to happen to them tomorrow, and they will basically have all the energy drained. The same as the situation of Jimmy Lai. Why refuse to put him on bail? And essentially, he was pretty much under house arrest. He could not talk to anyone. He could not say anything on social media. It's because they want to make sure that anyone who dares to challenge the regime also live miserably. So this is bad. And then at the same time, everyone expects things are going to get worse in Hong Kong.
If things are going to get worse, do you see any possibility of protests like we've seen in the past, say in 2019, especially with all this crackdown happening?
There's no way, because in Hong Kong to
Mm.
protest you have to apply for a no objection permit from the police, and this the reason why Joshua Wong and Edward Chow they
Yeah.
were sentenced for. They were just participating in a peaceful protest in June last year, and they've been sentenced to 7 to 13 months. So in Hong Kong, there's no way to have any more street protest. But people are talking about more quiet, behind the scene kind of protest. Hong Kong people are learning lessons from the Prague Spring, from Poland, from Eastern Europe, from East Berlin. One of these days that they may be light at the end of the tunnel. But it is really looking very bad, because the regime is clearly trying to kill Hong Kong civil society and the spirit to resist.
The world's reactions. I mean, you have the US imposing sanctions now, even against individual Chinese politicians or heads of entities. You have the EU Magnitsky Act as well. But it doesn't seem that anything that the world community is doing makes any difference to Xi Jinping or the Chinese Communist Party.
You are right, as all of these actions don't seem to really matter much. Apparently, Xi Jinping believes that Hong Kong itself is subversive, and therefore it is so worried about the party is so worried about its own survival that it is not going to tolerate any dissent, even at very high cost, which means essentially killing Hong Kong's autonomous status, all the economic privileges. um, they're hoping that maybe, ultimately, that this is going to be such a lose-lose situation that for example, a lot of international companies, they all have their headquarters in Hong Kong, regional headquarters in Hong Kong. And what do they do? Do they pull out, or do they hand over the data, or do they submit, just like HSBC has frozen the accounts of Ted Hui in one of the letters? Actually, he would have been arrested if not, because he had gone into exile already. But still, I would say that maybe, it is very difficult to slow down Beijing these days. But then, if all the world's democracies work together, so that Beijing can, all these leaders say, well, it's fine if we're sanctioned by the US, then we can still go to London. Well, they cannot go to London either. And if they also cannot go to France, they cannot go to Berlin, they cannot go to anywhere, then that may have an impact. But individuals is one thing. Xi Jinping seems to be very, very determined. So it's still a really, really hard battle for Hong Kong these days.
You're talking about democracies coming together, and like you said, the EU's Magnitsky Act is also targeting travel and financial aspects of individuals. A country like India has very cursorily mentioned Hong Kong. I think officially only once in Geneva in the UN Council, and even then it was not very pointed. Now, with the situation that India and China are at in terms of the northern borders with Tibet, do you think that India could possibly also add its voice or weight and in the democracies coming together to voice what's happening against in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Xinjiang, in Tibet?
Definitely, any democracies that would act the voices to, to say something about or do something about Beijing's oppression of Hong Kong and Xinjiang and Tibet and Mongolians and Taiwan. Any such actions would be wonderful. And India actually has its own self-interest. It's often, we often say that you cannot just appeal to countries' moral standing. No, because all countries, their foreign policies are often all just based on self-interest. And it is in India's national interest to take a strong stand against China. And I think that a lot of people after the Sino-Indian War and when after the invasion by Beijing, the PLA of India, they regretted that we should have kept the independence of Tibet. And so now I think Indians have to make sure that, there's no regrets. And my God, why would we kick out the Tibetan government in exile? Or why would we not give them more help? Or why would we not try to, for example, how to patrol the South China Sea or strengthen the Indo-Pacific Partnership Alliance when we still have a chance? So I think that these are the steps that India should really take.
Talking about India, but just going to what the EU has done, just again, in the timing of that was when the New Year, there was hardly any media coverage. The CAI, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, as it's called there. Now, do you think, of course, it has to go through European Parliament and then possibly even ratified by all the 26 members. Do you think that can be held as some kind of a sword over Beijing or the CCP in terms of scrapping that? Because ultimately it seems unless there's some pain involved, China or the CCP will not change its behavior.
This is a very good point. I think it is very important to keep in mind that if the U.S., the U.S. has been talking about decoupling with China. It is one thing, China would say, it's fine if you guys decouple with us. We go to Europe. Europe
Yeah.
is, has a much bigger market. And then, Britain is also now pretty desperate because of Brexit.
Mhm.
And so it is very important for the world's democracies to come together, just like sanctions. It is not enough that the US take any actions. Any unilateral actions are not going to be useful because Beijing is so good at playing divide and conquer. There has to be concerted action so that China cannot say, okay, we decouple with the US, but then we go to the EU. And then at the same time, I'm hoping that EU parliaments would also recognize that it is really in Europe's interest to take a strong stand. Because what happened in the US was really for many years, it was the business lobby that really stopped
Yeah.
Washington from taking any action. Well, I'm hoping that maybe in Europe, the business lobby will also understand that, you want to make sure you be nice to Beijing. You think that you can make profits in Beijing, in China over time, but no, they take your technology, they take over your markets, they take over your ideas, and then you'll be abandoned when you're no longer useful, and they have to understand that.
So, when you're talking about this crackdown, it's not just in Hong Kong. Of course, I don't want to broaden the subject too much, but within China itself, for example, there are reports on Jack Ma, who is lying low because he spoke out against investment or reform in the system. Uh, there is a sentence to death that has been given to a senior official for alleged corruption as well. So, do you see all of these prongs of so-called crackdowns, whether it's within mainland China or on the outlying areas, including in Hong Kong, part of a strategy, especially since you talked about the timing? One is if you have the CAI, Beijing can say, we continue to behave the same way, and the world is coming to us with money. And two, you said the Georgia runoffs as well. Do you see some kind of strategy there, or is it just something that's happening? Uh,
I would say that Beijing's aggressive behavior is across the board. It is not just in Hong Kong. Since you also talk about the clashes, the military confrontations
yeah.
along the Indian borders, and then in South China Sea, in East China Sea, and
Mhm.
also and it's not just about Mongolians and Tibetans and Uyghurs, but also taking increasingly aggressive action against Taiwan. So it is across the board. This is why I also argue that Hong Kong is kind of really the model for how China can change the world. If Beijing can completely reign in a once free city like Hong Kong, they can also change the free world order. And this is really a hard lesson that I think the rest of the world should keep an eye on. Hong Kong is not just a domestic issue. It really has global ramifications.
Professor Victoria Tin-bor Hui, we thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to our viewers, if you'd like to support our kind of journalism, do go on to our website to do that. Do follow our social media handles as well on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You've been watching StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.